imposing an additional financial burden on those of us that have been like pretty much shouldering the economic vitality of this neighborhood for the last 5 years seems pretty unfair and almost like punishing in a lot of ways. Just to say that, there's going to be some privatized things that happen that may or may not benefit your business. Why is their institution broke right now? When they're a 501c3, they have all the opportunity to apply for all the funding. They haven't hosted any events. What is going on? Like, these are legitimate questions.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
People. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Here we are, back on the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards, and I'm here to talk about the Uptown Association, their effort to create a business improvement district in Uptown. They want to expand their geographic footprint, include businesses further north and to the east, including Lynn Lake. A BID would be able to assess property owners essentially like a tax to provide additional services in the area. They've mentioned things like security and potentially like ambassadors like you see in the downtown improvement district, which is the only other BID in the city. And joining me to talk about all that is Damla Erten of Sencha Tea Bar, the owner of Sencha Tea Bar at 26 in Hennepin. Did I get your name correct, Damla?
Yes, Damla Erten, yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you for talking with me about this.
And are you in a vehicle at 26th and Hennepin?
Yes.
Okay. Damla's coming to me from a vehicle at 26th and Hennepin.
It's a little loud in there at the moment. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So why would a business improvement district for Uptown be a bad idea?
It's not that a business improvement district or like the downtown improvement district is always inherently a bad idea. It's circumstantial. I think that right now the neighborhoods in Uptown are going through way too much and have lingering effects of things that we have gone through in the last few years still to be able to take on an additional tax. So the main issue right now is that we can't really afford anything else. We can't afford to take on any more taxes. We can't afford to take on any more bills. People are having a hard time keeping up with their existing overhead costs, and it would be really detrimental to a large part of the community, and not necessarily a part of the community that is adequately represented by the association that's pursuing this process.
I've been skeptical that you could get business owners to agree because do you know like what number of business owners have to agree for it to be formed? Because I'm skeptical that people would want to pay what is essentially an additional tax on top of their existing property tax to form this.
Yeah. Totally. So one of the things that makes a business improvement district essentially fairly inequitable is the fact that you don't need like majority vote of the entire neighborhood, including, business owners, residents, basically like all stockholders. It would be just based on majority property ownership. So meaning, the group of people or companies that own majority of the property in the neighborhood are the ones that would have to essentially vote yes. So it completely disregards an equitable voting process, and it doesn't really require it at all. So even, things like having public forums or providing a platform where people can like express their opinions on this, it ultimately doesn't really make a difference, which is one of the things that's actually the most frustrating about it, because it's one of the things that kind of plays into business improvement districts not being very transparent or accountable organizations.
So is there an alternative? You have formed something called the Uptown Community Coalition, and I'm wondering what you think is the alternative to addressing Uptown's problems.
So, to clarify, Uptown Community Coalition is a community organization, so it's not a business association or a neighborhood association. It's aiming to be, we have an application in to be a 501c3, like nonprofit community organization. And mostly, our objective is to provide support, legislative assistance, and advocacy assistance in order to help put together a vision and execute a vision for Uptown that is truly diverse and equitable. Like, that is our mission statement, is to do whatever basically we can do in order to help Uptown become a truly diverse, profitable, but equitable platform for everybody. So that's what UCC is. And then, so as far as, what we are proposing or what we're working on that would combat or provide an alternative for the Business Improvement District, well, it's a few things, but right now the thing that we are very actively pursuing is a grant program. And this would actually not just be for Uptown, but it would be for the entire city of Minneapolis. It is very similar, or we're hoping to structure it very similarly to the STAR grant program in St. Paul, which has been running very successfully for almost 40 years. And so it would be a grant program that would be consistent. It would be sustainable. It would be something that is available year after year. And it would be something where the funds would be generated from a sales tax. So the key there in difference between how the funds are generated for a business improvement district, a business improvement district, like you said, collects funds from essentially what is assessed like a property tax. So it's not a property tax, but it functions like a property tax, meaning that it is assessed based on, square footage, on like the amount of land, but it is ultimately applicable to everyone. So even if you rent in Uptown, right, the person who owns your home is going to have to pay this tax. And so therefore it's going to trickle down to your bills and your rent increasing. If you're a business owner that doesn't own your property, same thing, right? You're leasing, but again, whoever owns your property is going to have to pay this, and they're going to make that up somewhere. They're not just going to absorb that. And then similarly, if you are a resident who owns your property, so you're not considered a majority property owner, right? Because you probably only own just one property, meaning you don't really get to be a part of this process of like electing for this thing to happen, but you still have to pay into it. A sales tax would mean that anybody who comes into the neighborhood and who patronizes the neighborhood and benefits from the services in that neighborhood would be paying into it. So yes, if you go to your neighboring businesses, then you would be contributing to this as a part of the sales tax, but so would anybody else that's coming into the neighborhood and that's profiting or like benefiting from the neighborhood. So it's a much more equitable way of collecting funds, like for something that is going to like ultimately benefit the community. And then also it kind of more equally distributes the weight of that financial responsibility. So instead of it just being, put on the existing people that are like living and running businesses in this environment, it puts it more equally dispersed between everybody. That's whether you live there or work there, or you're just coming into that neighborhood to patronize the businesses, you're contributing to these funds. And then a lot of the times too, these grants are set up in a way of like having connections to other objectives and other like values and missions that the city has in their, like future vision, to basically have, help these businesses or help these organizations kind of like help the city achieve their vision. So there'll be some parameters set around like what you can and can't use these funds for. But ultimately it provides a pretty like mutually beneficial program for both the city and for the people that are like living and functioning in the city.
So tell me what it's like to have been a business owner in Uptown over the last couple of years, and like what kinds of things do you need? I've been to a couple of Uptown Association meetings recently, and there's been talk of like they had like private security contractors come up and present to the room. Like, is that the kind of thing you would want money spent on? Like, what do you need?
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about like security in general and if we need that, yeah, I mean, definitely we need that. But as far as, how we get that security is where we seem to, or at least, myself and the people that are working with UCC seem to not quite agree with like the Uptown Association, for instance, because to me, privatizing these services. So first of all, imposing an additional financial burden on those of us that have been like pretty much shouldering the economic vitality of this neighborhood for the last 5 years seems pretty unfair and almost like punishing in a lot of ways. Just to say that, there's going to be some privatized things that happen that may or may not benefit your business. And so to really like dissect, like, what you said with like the security or like hiring some like, private services for people to pick up some extra like garbage in front of your business. Yeah, that sounds great in theory, but the way that I look at it, we're already paying taxes for the city to do that with their various, departments. And so there's, tax dollars already like going into these services that the city has established. And then so instead of, coming together as a community and maybe demanding like a reformat in that structure or like how those resources are split up between the different neighborhoods in Minneapolis and kind of like working with the city on helping them get their processes to a better place so it will benefit us better. We're saying let's just throw more money into it. And then as far as like the results or like what we're actually going to see from this, so you kind of see it downtown, right? So there's a downtown improvement district. I'm sure a lot of people know or like have seen those guys, in the bright shirts that are walking around and, helping people. And first of all, you don't see that everywhere. So when you're driving downtown, I mean, how often or how many times are you even really seeing these people? Because there is not enough money that the neighborhood could raise to station these people or enough of them in every part of the neighborhood. And then second, there's not enough money to station them there all the time. So we're talking about these people that are there like, I don't know, whatever time it is, right? But it's not all day and all night long. Most of the crime that businesses are seeing happen in Uptown specifically are happening at night, like in the middle of the night, which is not a time when like these services would be applicable. And then second of all, these people that you're hiring for like security, like they're not police officers. They're not trained like police force. So we're not even talking about like, pouring some money into like hiring police, like off-duty police or something like that. Like these are people that are trained in, some emergency response, I'm sure, like maybe CPR or something like that, but they can't detain anyone. They can't really like, they're not allowed to carry any like protective, gear. And ultimately what's going to be happening is they're going to just be calling the police, like, as soon as they notice something is happening, but it doesn't really like prevent or assist with crime the way that like they're claiming it's going to. Because first of all, if you're putting like people in neon outfits like walking around, that's something criminals are also going to become savvy to. Like they're not just gonna not know about that or still attempt to like do whatever they do when these people are around. And then second of all, most of this happening at night is not going to have any effect on that. And then lastly, this isn't going to repair our relationship with the police. This isn't going to repair like the dynamic that currently exists between the police department and the neighborhoods of Uptown. So ultimately, it's like a Band-Aid solution. So I'm not saying that this might not prevent some crime from happening here or there, maybe in front of some people's businesses, or, the extra trash pickups, like might not clean the area up a little bit better or something like that. But ultimately, are we really like solving the like deeply rooted issue, or are we just throwing a Band-Aid on it, and a Band-Aid that doesn't even cover like all of the scars.
Do you have a sense of whether this is inevitable? Because the rhetoric from the Uptown Association has made it seem like, oh, done deal. We have the support we need to do this. It's happening. Is that true from what you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, from what I know, and I, had a little bit of an insider perspective to it. I was on this committee that they were running for a little while, that was basically put together to, gather information from the community, from the businesses, as far as like what Uptown needs and what people need, and kind of, bridging that gap between like some of these organizations and actually like what people in the neighborhood are feeling. And so, I got some information about this during that, which was, I want to say it was at least like maybe 9-10 months ago at this time. And what I was told was that they have majority property ownership, like just based around who their members are as an organization. And so it's not really something that they need anybody else for. Like, they don't need to recruit anybody else to like vote into this, basically. And so what, I've brought up from the beginning is, how equitable is that? Like, how, are we actually, fully being compassionate to the whole community? Because if we're saying, this is something that's going to impose like this financial burden on the community, and we're just going to pursue it, and we don't need any other opinions, and, it is what it is, like, that to me is very dismissive. And it also doesn't account for those of us that have like stayed in this community when major corporations and people who could arguably like afford something like this. So again, like, why this works in the downtown district is because downtown is mostly like commercial property ownership is mostly going to be major corporations. And so they're the ones that are like paying mostly into this, and therefore can absorb that cost. In Uptown, that would not be the case. It would be more equally distributed between like smaller businesses and smaller stakeholders in the neighborhood. So as far as, from their perspective, yes, they for sure are dealing with it like it's a done deal. And that's just inherently a problem for me too. Like, I founded UCC on the basis that we would work on and provide support and assistance for whatever was going to create a diverse and equitable neighborhood in Uptown. So a process that inherently and also historically is essentially like a gentrification and ethnic cleansing, institution, goes directly against what I founded this organization on. So I'm not going to just let something like this happen without making some noise, or at least letting people know what's happening. Because another like deep issue as it relates to this process and it being like a done deal is that whatever they're even putting on to gather feedback from the neighborhood, or to like give people in the neighborhood this impression that they're like involved, is actually not the case, because they have also been very clear about the fact that they don't really need anybody else from the neighborhood to support this or not.
So one of the
yeah.
things that prompted me to contact you is I heard there was a business owner behind the Uptown Community Coalition, and I saw some of the messaging. It's like, bike and walk to our businesses. Like, you never hear from Uptown businesses that people should be biking and walking. All I hear is resentment over the buses and the bikes. And I was like, what business is this that is telling people they should be biking and walking to them? So
Yes. So I have here's the thing. I have a nonprofit background, like a community building nonprofit background, but I obviously like work in the realm of for-profit business right now. And so I always have a very kind of dualistic view on these things. So even with the construction project, which we've been very like heavily involved in, my whole thing was like, we need this done. Like, this street sucks. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be, reformatted. I'm not against road reconstruction at all. What was problematic for me more than like the parking, the bike lanes, and just whatever was happening with that was how the city ultimately like ended up dealing and like pushing through this project with no kind of like oversight of what had been happening in this neighborhood for the last 5 years, because construction projects are planned out years in advance, right? And so the way that this one went down, all of the meetings and like the, like community outreach meetings in regards to this project were happening at the same time as when we were like holding down riots and like trying to prevent our businesses from broken into and stuff. So even for me, I attended like one meeting back then because there was just too much going on. I just had to focus on keeping my business open. And then COVID, of course, was also happening at the same time. It was just a lot going on. And so a lot of people didn't get to participate or like know what was happening. And even the conversations of people fighting about parking or bike lanes and this and that, it was because there was a lot just being decided on and a lot being done that wasn't truly like a unified view or like a unified effort from the neighborhood. It was very segmented because we were all dealing with so much. Like people could basically only participate when they could participate or like when something was blatantly put in front of their faces. And then, all of that phase of the project was done. And then now several years pass where nothing really is communicated from the end of the city or the county to the neighborhood in regards to the project, because there really nothing is to communicate. Like at that time, they're basically just working on like getting the funds together, like putting out the RFPs for the bids, like, and getting all of that situated. So then by the time all of that gets done, and now like it's time for the construction and this conversation is coming back up again, now people are reminded that this is going to be happening. And then in that time, who knows what else happened or like how else these businesses fared like in that time, which for us wasn't great. Like it's not like we went through that period of businesses closing, increase, empty storefronts, and then like we, went back up on that, like on that scale. We're still on a downward. I mean, we're just basically maybe getting to a point where like some of these spaces are starting to get filled, but we are still a largely like vacant storefront corridor, at least along Hennepin. So nothing really changed as far as like things didn't get worse and then get better. It's like we were still at a point where things were getting worse when the, project was pushed through to begin. And then so when you add major road reconstruction in front of these businesses, of course, that's going to affect us more significantly than it would have if these other things that had happened in this neighborhood hadn't happened, or if those things had been dealt with like appropriately and differently. So it was just like very much piling on all of these things that, when you really think about it, is like how is a business supposed to survive all of that? Like it's a lot. I mean, when you compare it to like what some other cities in Minnesota or even what other neighborhoods in Minneapolis have gone through, it just doesn't equate. Like it is so much more. So yeah, in terms of like the, bike thing and the walk thing, I mean, for me, it's all about like a balance of, yes, I have guests, or clients that come in from outside of the city, and I do want a place for them to park. But I actually think there's plenty of parking in Uptown, and people are probably going to be outraged at me saying that, but there's a lot of side streets. There's a lot of areas where it's still free parking. And for that matter, even the, parking that they like took away on Hennepin, they replaced it with paid parking. So it's just a matter of like, it's no longer free. But there's still parking, and, and I look at this like, what if we were downtown or somewhere else where like the parking is genuinely terrible, so I don't even look at it like it's that bad. And then as far as the biking situation, like as a business, especially when you've gone through what we've gone through in that neighborhood in the last 5 years, if you are a like productive business owner, what you're doing is you're trying to restructure. You're trying to figure out like, what else can I do to make sure that my business stays afloat? Like, how can I restructure even the way that I direct my clients to like come to me or to like patronize me in order to like still make this work for myself. So in the last few years, I really pushed towards, more community connections, like really, really being in tune with the people in the neighborhood. And those are the people that helped, us stay afloat. So it's like definitely both things are important, but I think as a business owner, you should want both. Like you should care about both, because if all you're caring about is those people that drive to your neighborhood and need a place to park, then when something like this happens, or let's say like parking just, gets less or diminished for some other reason, what are you going to lean on? You need to lean on the people in the neighborhood. But if you haven't done any work, or if you haven't like supported that in any way up until then of course you're going to feel it a lot more significantly.
I've thought about this a lot. There are tens of thousands of people in the general Uptown area, like within walking distance, within biking distance.
Yeah.
It is the transit friendliest area in the entire state of Minnesota, with all the bus lines, whether it's Hennepin or Lake or Lindale. And so it seems like a missed opportunity. I don't know if it's the fact that Uptown had been dominated by like chains and it was expected to like compete with Mall of America with people driving in. But like I see a future with local businesses who actually cater to the tens of thousands of potential customers who are right there waiting to be brought in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of, what I'm talking about with, you have to, as a business owner, like take the responsibility of outreach, like, and what is your business outreaching to? So if like it's important, or if it just makes sense for you to be outreaching to guests who have to drive in, then are you even in the right place? I mean, what is the point of being located in a specific neighborhood if you're not going to pay any attention to what's going on in that neighborhood, or like the needs of the people in that neighborhood? So I think this kind of, has a part of this conversation is like how to like run and operate a business or something, which is something that I, do counsel people on. I mean, this is something I actually do as like a consultation business, but at the end of the day, like as a, nonprofit, or as somebody that's just like doing work in this neighborhood, I can't run other people's businesses for them. And I actually like pretty plainly like refuse to babysit other people's businesses. My whole thing is I'm all about providing people with all of the information and like access, like equitable access to everything that they, could utilize. And then after that, it's like your responsibility, and so I'm very big on that. And I think that there is a certain degree of people that like miss the mark on doing that for their business, and then they really like very heavily feel the like repercussions of these things that are going on. And then, you have people who do that outreach and like who have that connection to the community, and maybe they're not, taking it as far as I am, like with starting a nonprofit or like doing whatever else. But there are people who understand that sometimes you just have to reformat how your business functions, or what all areas your business gets involved in order to push through and become like malleable with the times. Like you have to change with the times. I think we all learned that through COVID. Like people had no choice but to learn that through COVID, but for some reason they don't seem to apply it the same way when other things happen within their neighborhoods or around their businesses.
So here we are at the end, and I ask people to recommend things at the end, and so I wonder if you have anything Uptown related to recommend.
I absolutely recommend that people find out exactly what's going on in this neighborhood, because there's a lot that's happening that is being decided on by, a small group of people, or like a small representation of people in this neighborhood. And there's a whole diverse group of people in the neighborhood that either don't know what's going on, or they don't know what to do about it. And so part of UCC really advocating for this very clearly, just to be really clear, is not to just straight up oppose the Uptown Association. I have no personal qualms with any of these people. I don't even really know them that personally. For me, it's all about, we are all functioning in this neighborhood, and we can't just gear things in this neighborhood to fit a very, very small group of people. Like, this neighborhood already has diversity, so we should be celebrating that and like creating systems that help all of those people be successful in the future. So definitely like learning and finding out what's going on. And then as far as like the business improvement district stuff, what we can do about it is we can oppose it. Ultimately, this process has to be approved by the city council. So you can, have majority property ownership in order to have a proposal to the city council, but the city council still has to approve it. And so if, we can gather enough people and make sure people are informed about like what are the actual repercussions of this situation and how it will affect them, we can speak up and not only oppose it to the council, but we can maybe provide some other options like the grant program that I'm proposing. So that's absolutely something that people can and should be doing. And then the other thing that I would say is to ask the hard questions. Like, it's great when this organization is going around asking people, oh, what do you envision for Uptown? Oh, you want more diversity? Great. Yes, we do too. Like, I mean, that's something that makes you feel good, but I would ask them how they're going to make sure that that happens. When a business improvement district concept is historically something that is so like inequitable and ultimately like does not create diversity or accountability, if this thing does pass or if it actually does happen, my only hope at that point would be that at least we hold them accountable to do it in a way that's transparent and not where, we're paying in and putting in all this extra money for these things, and then 60% of that money is getting eaten up by administrative costs. I mean, really making these people like explain themselves, and I think for how much like passion and how much history and diversity and everything there is in Uptown, there's no reason why we can't come up with something, and we can't all come up with something that is representative of everyone and not just, one group of people.
So you mentioned the city council having to approve this, and it reminded me that the board chair of the Uptown Association is also the chair of a PAC that is spending $600,000 to buy essentially city council seats through the DFL process.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that note, like, I have heard them and I have, seen them like employ tactics like, hiring lobbyists to, like sway the vote of council members and things like that. So yeah, like all of that. I mean, and this is what I'm talking about is like, these are the things that people don't know. And I think that it's easy to just celebrate an organization for doing something when you don't really know what they're doing. Right. Like when they're doing something that seemingly is great, but nobody's asking the questions of like, well, how are you going to do that? Like, you're talking about creating a diverse Uptown. Look at your board. And again, this isn't like in a judgmental way at all. I'm just saying that if this organization is going to, put out there that they care about diversity, they care about the future of Uptown, they want it to be a place that's like a safe place and a, profitable place for everyone. How can you say that as an institution when your entire board lacks the diversity that would support that statement? So these are the type of things that I want people to pay attention to. Like, I don't want people to just be enamored by these ideas of like, let's make Uptown great again. Yes, let's. But how exactly are we going to do that in a way that doesn't just benefit like one group of people who can afford it? And that's the key word too. I just want to emphasize, like, a lot of these people and a lot of their members and like they're paying, business members are a lot of businesses that can technically afford this extra tax. The rest of us can't. Yeah. And we don't get to say or do anything about it. That's what I want people to understand is like, we don't have to just put up with that. Like, it may pass as far as, them having enough commercial property ownership to make this a thing or to like bring it in front of the council. But we can still do whatever we can to make sure that it doesn't pass on the council level. And then ultimately, if it does pass, then we just need to do whatever we can to hold these people accountable. Like, why is their institution broke right now? When they're a 501c3, they have all the opportunity to apply for all the funding. They haven't hosted any events. What is going on? Like, these are legitimate questions. These are not just me like nitpicking or trying to like tear them apart because my organization is competing with them. Again, I have no intentions of turning UCC into a business association or a neighborhood association. It is specifically formed actually to hold institutions like that accountable. So that's all I'm doing. And, along that way, I'm also like, I'm like a doer. So like along that way, I can't just be opposing something. Like I have to provide an alternative, which is where the whole, Minneapolis grant program thing came from, because I wanted to make sure that people knew that, I don't care to just like hear myself talk with this stuff. Like I'm actually talking about this stuff because I care and because I think that people deserve to be fully informed about what's happening in their neighborhood, where their money is going, and ultimately like factors that may impact their business or even themselves, like as residents, being able to survive in this neighborhood.
Well, Damla Erten of Sencha Tea Bar, I recommend people check out Sencha Tea Bar in the neighborhood here.
Thank you.
And the Uptown Community Coalition is on Instagram. I will link to these things in the show description. Thank you for joining me for this.
Yes, thank you so much for all the work that you do and for putting this stuff out there and just helping people stay informed. That's honestly like the best thing and the first thing that we should be doing.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.